The series begins by showing a television show that aired in 1968. In the talk show, a host named Murray and two scientists were discussing several disease outbreaks that had become pandemic throughout the world. The scientists then expressed their opinions about medical science and medicine that had become more advanced and developed, so that some of these diseases could be completely cured without even causing any side effects. However, one of the speakers, an epidemiologist named Newman, suggested that the biggest threat in the field of medicine is fungi. Newman revealed that fungi can infect insects, ants for example, then enter the ant's brain and take over its body. Newman added that the fungus still needs food while inside the ant's body, so over time, they will eat the host's body, but not let them die, so that the host will turn into a living corpse whose mind is controlled by the fungus. Upon hearing that, a bespectacled scientist named Schoenhaus seemed skeptical of the fungal infection that Newman had just described, because fungi cannot survive in an environment where the temperature is high enough. Therefore, it is impossible for fungi to infect humans because fungi cannot survive if the internal body temperature of their host reaches 34 degrees Celsius. However, Newman explains that fungi might be able to evolve and survive in high-temperature environments if the world experiences global warming that causes the climate to become much warmer. If that were to happen, Newman warns that the outbreak of diseases caused by fungal infections would spread very quickly and they would not be able to prevent it, and they might never find a cure. The scene then switches to 35 years later, in 2003, and shows a girl named Sarah who has just woken up and realizes that she has overslept. Sarah hurriedly wakes up her father and goes to the kitchen to make breakfast. Sarah had intended to make birthday pancakes for her father, Joel, who was having his birthday that day. But Joel forgot to buy pancake flour, so Sarah only cooked scrambled eggs for their breakfast. Ever since her mother passed away a few years ago, Sarah has been helping her father as much as possible with chores like cooking. While the father and daughter were enjoying breakfast, Joel's younger brother, Tommy, appeared and opened the refrigerator to find something edible. Tommy is a former soldier who is still having trouble finding a job, so he still lives with Joel and Sarah in the house. Not long after, they hear a news broadcast on the radio about the chaos in Jakarta, and U.S. citizens living in Jakarta are advised to be careful and stay indoors as much as possible. Joel thought that Jakarta was a region in the Middle East, but Sarah told him that Jakarta was the capital of an Asian country called Indonesia. After breakfast, Sarah went back to her bedroom to get her school bag. Shortly afterward, Sarah secretly sneaked into Joel's room to get Joel's broken watch. Sarah intends to repair the watch because the watch used to be a birthday gift from her mother. Long story short, Sarah, who was at school, seemed to be getting bored and wanted to go home immediately because she intended to prepare a birthday surprise for her father. On the way home by bus, Sarah took the time to stop by a watch shop to repair her father's watch because she intended to give the watch as a birthday present. When the man who owned the watch shop was fixing Joel's watch, his wife suddenly appeared and told him to hurry up and close the shop. Fortunately, the man finished his work to fix Joel's watch, so his wife then gave the watch to Sarah and told her to hurry home. When she was about to go home, Sarah realized that something strange had happened because the streets that had been busy suddenly became quiet. Before returning home, Sarah visited her neighbor, Mrs. Adler, because she had promised to help her make cookies. After putting the cookie dough in the oven, Sarah decided to do her homework while waiting for the cookies to bake. While Sarah was looking through Mrs. Adler's DVD collection, unbeknownst to her, Mrs. Adler's mother, Granny, appeared to have several seizures before she finally stopped seizing and sat still like a statue. Sarah then approached Mrs. Adler in the kitchen and borrowed a DVD as she said goodbye to go home. Before leaving, Sarah was surprised to see Mrs. Adler's pet dog looking at Granny so intensely, as if the dog was aware of Granny's strangeness. Later that evening, Joel finally arrived home at 10 o'clock at night, and he then apologized to Sarah for forgetting to buy a birthday cake. Sarah then gave Joel's repaired watch as a birthday present, and Joel seemed happy that his daughter was so attentive to him. Sarah thinks that her father is too busy doing many things and doesn't have time to think about himself, so Sarah took the initiative to do something for her father, who is very dear to her. In addition to the repaired watch, Sarah also invited her father to watch an action movie that she borrowed from Mrs. Adler, because Sarah knew that her father really wanted to watch the movie. Even though Sarah's birthday present could be said to be quite simple, Joel felt very happy because his beloved daughter really cared about him. By midnight, Sarah had fallen asleep because she was too sleepy, while Joel was still awake watching the movie. Shortly afterward, Joel got a phone call from Tommy, who told him that he was in jail and asked Joel to release him. Tommy explains that he was involved in a fight with a man who went crazy because the man suddenly attacked a waitress. Tommy tried to defend the waitress, but people reported the fight to the police, so he was thrown in jail. After taking Sarah to her bedroom, Joel then rushes to the police station to free Tommy from prison. At around 2 in the morning, Sarah woke up to the sound of helicopters near her house and found that she was home alone. While in the living room, Sarah saw an emergency broadcast on television that advised residents to stay at home. Sarah tried to figure out what was going on by changing channels, but all the channels were broadcasting the emergency broadcast. In the midst of her confusion, Sarah was startled by Mercy, Mrs. Adler's pet dog, who barked in front of her house and looked agitated as if the dog was asking Sarah for protection. Sarah rushed over to Mercy and tried to calm the dog down while walking to Mrs. Adler's house to take Mercy home. But unexpectedly, Mercy suddenly ran fast away from Mrs. Adler's house as if there was something scary in the house. Sarah, who felt curious about what really happened to Mrs. Adler, then ventured to enter Mrs. Adler's house and found a badly injured Mr. Adler who asked for help from her. Not only that, Sarah also saw Granny, who had turned into a zombie and was biting Mrs. Adler, who was lying on the floor. Sarah, who felt terrified, rushed out of Mrs. Adler's house because Granny had noticed her presence and tried to chase her. When Granny was about to attack Sarah, Joel and Tommy arrived in time to save her and managed to knock Granny down. Sarah looks shocked when she sees her father attack Granny with an adjustable wrench, but Joel then calms her down by saying that he has to do it or they will all be killed. Upon knowing that the situation was becoming increasingly chaotic, Tommy immediately told Joel and Sarah to get into the car because they had to leave the place quickly. In the car, Sarah asks her father about what exactly has happened, and Tommy tells Sarah that Granny and the crazy townspeople are infected with some kind of virus or parasite and causing chaos in the middle of the city. Joel intends to take his family to evacuate outside the city, but a severe traffic jam occurs on the highway due to the large number of residents who want to flee outside the city. So Joel tells Tommy to get out of the way and find an alternative road to the border. But unfortunately, the government had mobilized military forces to blockade the border so that none of the citizens could leave the city. Because the road they usually take to go to the border has been blockaded by military forces, Joel then tells Tommy to take an alternative road to the north. Tommy is initially reluctant to take the road because the area is a densely populated residential area, but Joel insists that they have no other way to get to the border other than that road. In an attempt to get to the border by going down the road, Joel and his family are caught in a mess that gets worse when a plane suddenly crashes near them and causes a violent explosion that turns their car upside down. After Joel manages to get Sarah out of the car, a police car suddenly crashes into their car and causes a blaze that separates Joel and Sarah from Tommy. Joel then told Tommy to go to the river first, while he and Sarah would find another way. Because Sarah's injuries did not allow her to walk, Joel carried Sarah while trying to find an alternative way to the river. In trying to find the right path, Joel and Sarah accidentally met a group of people who had been infected and immediately became their targets. Joel and Sarah were almost attacked by an infected man, but fortunately, a soldier appeared and killed the infected. However, when Joel tried to ask the soldier for help, he pointed his gun at Joel because he thought that Joel and Sarah were infected. Although Joel said that they were not infected, the soldier seemed to ignore Joel's words and rushed to contact his superior over the radio. Instead of helping the wounded Joel and Sarah, the soldier opened fire on them, so Joel rushed to escape while protecting Sarah. When the soldier was about to kill Joel, Tommy appeared in time to save him. But unfortunately, Sarah was shot in the stomach and suffered heavy bleeding until she finally died in Joel's arms. 20 years later, in the year 2023, a young boy was seen hobbling aimlessly and discovers the ruined city of Boston, which indicates that the plague has spread throughout the world and become a global pandemic that was collapsing society. The boy suddenly collapsed and was found by two Federal Disaster Response Agency or FEDRA soldiers who took him to the quarantine zone in Boston. After the fungal mass infected all cities in the world, the government and military were destroyed and the few who survived formed quarantine zone authorities to protect the survivors. The scene then shows the young boy observing a poster explaining the symptoms of the cordyceps fungus and the phases they will go through before being transformed into a zombie-like creature. Shortly afterward, a female soldier from FEDRA approached the boy and asked about his identity. However, the boy seemed to be in shock, so he didn't say anything to the female soldier, while another soldier examined the boy and found that he was infected. Upon knowing that, the female soldier tries to calm the boy down by telling him that he will get delicious food as well as new clothes and toys, as long as the boy is willing to be injected, and the boy seems to relax a little. The scene then switches to show the survivors destroying the bodies of the cordyceps fungus-infected people by burning them. An exhausted woman looks upset when a truck carrying the bodies of the infected arrives, but she has no choice but to finish her work. However, the woman didn't seem to have the heart to destroy a body in front of her, so she then asked Joel for help. Surprisingly, the body turned out to be the boy who was previously rescued by two FEDRA soldiers. Because the boy was infected, they were forced to kill him and destroy his body. Although 20 years have passed, the scientists have yet to find a vaccine to cure people who have been infected with the cordyceps fungus, so they are forced to destroy their bodies by burning them, hoping to stop the pandemic. On the other hand, the survivors living in the quarantine zone or QZ, like Joel, do various jobs for which they are paid with coupons that can be used to buy food and other goods. Therefore, Joel takes many jobs at once so that he has enough coupons that he can later use to buy the things he needs. Joel also works as a smuggler who smuggles goods from one place to another to earn extra income. Not only the citizens, some Federal soldiers also often buy contraband from Joel. One of them is Lee, who often buys drugs from Joel. In the meantime, a woman named Tess was seen being held captive by a man named Robert and his henchmen. Tess turned out to have been tricked by Robert, who had sold the truck battery to someone else, even though Tess had paid him to get the truck battery. When Tess was about to fight back, she was beaten by Robert's henchmen until her face was bruised. However, Robert seemed to be afraid of Tess' partner if he found out that his henchmen had beaten Tess, so Tess then convinced Robert that she would keep their confrontation a secret from her partner as long as Robert released her. Before Robert could give his decision, there was a sudden explosion at the place, so Tess took the opportunity to escape. However, Tess found herself in an area that was the site of a battle between Federal soldiers and the Fireflies, a rebel militia opposing the quarantine zone authorities. Tess tried to escape from the place, but some soldiers caught her, thinking that she was part of the Fireflies. The scene then switches to show a girl named Ellie who is being held captive at the Fireflies headquarters. Ellie, who was fed up with being interrogated every day with the same questions, threatened that she would report them to Fedra for kidnapping her. Meanwhile, Joel meets the radio communications officer to ask for news about Tommy, who hasn't returned to the quarantine zone for months. Joel looks worried about Tommy because Tommy usually sends messages to Joel via radio at least once a day to inform him about his condition. Joel then asked the radio communications officer for the location of the tower where Tommy was, as he intended to catch up with Tommy. Upon arriving home, a frustrated Joel planned to catch up with Tommy and prepared the items he would need for the trip. Tommy is Joel's only living relative after Joel tragically lost his beloved daughter, Sarah, 20 years ago. Therefore, Joel will do everything possible to find Tommy's whereabouts. The next day, Joel, who had just woken up, was very surprised to see Tess, whose face was bruised from being beaten by Robert's men. Tess then tells Joel that she didn't manage to get the truck battery, which Robert had sold to another party. Because they intend to use the battery to travel to find Tommy's whereabouts, Joel and Tess rush off to get the battery back. Meanwhile, at the Fireflies headquarters, a woman named Marlene, who is the leader of the Fireflies, was seen warning her subordinates about the Federal soldiers who were going to attack their headquarters. One of her subordinates named Kim then asked Marlene about Ellie because Marlene locked Ellie up in a room with a very tight guard, but Marlene never told them about Ellie. Upon hearing that, Marlene told her subordinates to prepare everything to face the attack from the Federal soldiers, while she told Kim to stay in the room. After her subordinates left the room, Marlene then gave a piece of paper to Kim, and Kim looked so surprised when she read the writing on the paper. Kim finally found out why Marlene was so protective of Ellie and fully supported whatever Marlene's plan was regarding Ellie. After giving directions to her subordinates, Marlene then met Ellie and told Ellie that Ellie should thank her because Marlene had ordered her subordinates not to kill Ellie. Ellie did not deny this, so she tried to be more polite to Marlene. Ellie seems surprised when Marlene calls her by her real name, which indicates that Marlene knows about Ellie's past, who was an orphan raised in a Federal shelter. Ellie then asks Marlene why she locked her up there and begs Marlene to release her. Ellie even tried to convince Marlene that she would not report Marlene and her subordinates to Fedra if Marlene released her. However, Marlene refuses to release Ellie because Ellie has something valuable inside her that might change the world for the better. Marlene then tells Ellie that they will take Ellie somewhere and tells Ellie to get ready. In the meantime, Joel and Tess get information about Robert selling the truck battery to the Fireflies, so they decide to infiltrate the Fireflies headquarters through an underground railroad tunnel and find the body of the infected attached to the wall and covered in mold, which indicates that he was infected years ago. Tess thought that he might have been infected and decided to enter the underground tunnel, but Joel assumed that he might have gotten infected inside the tunnel, so he told Tess to hurry up and leave. Tess and Joel finally found the secret door that led to the Fireflies headquarters, but to their surprise, Robert and his subordinates were killed in a shootout with the Fireflies soldiers. Tess, who found a truck battery near Robert's body, soon realized that the shootout happened because Robert intended to defraud the Fireflies by selling the broken truck battery. At the same time, Joel was suddenly surprised by Ellie, who tried to attack him with a knife, but Joel managed to avoid the attack. Marlene, who suffered a gunshot wound in a shootout incident against Robert and his subordinates, was surprised to see Joel and Tess at the Fireflies headquarters. Joel and Marlene apparently knew each other because Joel often worked with the Fireflies group. Upon knowing that Joel is a smuggler and has pretty good fighting and survival skills, Marlene then asked Joel to take Ellie to the Fireflies headquarters located in Massachusetts in exchange for a working truck. After a brief discussion with Tess, Joel finally accepted Marlene's offer and agreed to take Ellie to Massachusetts. Joel then took Ellie to his house and told Ellie to rest because they would be leaving at night, while Tess went outside to find the safest route they would use to sneak out of the quarantine zone. Later that evening, while Joel and Ellie were engaged in conversation, Tess finally arrived and told them to get ready as they would soon be leaving the quarantine zone. Joel and the others manage to sneak out through an underground passage, but unfortunately, they accidentally run into Lee, who was on duty at the time. Although Joel and Lee knew each other and Lee was one of the regular customers who often bought drugs from Joel, Lee still did his job professionally by warning Joel and the others about the punishment they would get if they secretly left the quarantine zone. Joel tried to convince Lee to let them go by offering Lee the drugs for free, but Lee insisted that he would still follow the established procedures by conducting checks on the three of them. Upon hearing that, Ellie looked panicked and agitated, as if she was hiding something from them. When Lee examined Ellie, Ellie suddenly attacked Lee, so Lee immediately pointed his gun at Ellie and threatened to shoot her. Joel, who saw Lee threatening Ellie with a gun, then tried to protect Ellie and asked Lee to put down his gun. However, Lee refused to lower his gun, so they got into an argument, which then reminded Joel of the incident 20 years ago, when a soldier threatened him and Sarah with a gun because he thought they were infected. Joel suddenly attacked Lee and beat him until he lost control, but Tess finally managed to stop Joel by showing that Ellie had been infected. Upon knowing that, Tess and Joel looked shocked and thought that Marlene had deceived them. However, Ellie tries to convince them that she's been infected for 3 weeks and claims that she's immune because she didn't show any symptoms after being infected with the cordyceps fungus. Even though Joel and Tess have learned that Ellie has been infected with the cordyceps fungus, they choose to continue their mission to escort Ellie to Massachusetts before the federal soldiers arrive to arrest them. The scene then switches to the past and shows the atmosphere in Jakarta before the global pandemic that devastated human civilization. One day, 2 Indonesian national soldiers are seen entering a restaurant to meet a middle-aged woman named Ratna and take her somewhere. During the car ride, Ratna tries to confirm her identity to the soldiers, and a general named Hidayat mentions that Ratna is a mycology professor at the University of Indonesia and tells her about the critical situation they are facing. Upon arriving at a heavily guarded facility, Ratna was taken to a lab and asked to examine the specimen they had prepared. Ratna immediately examined the specimen under a microscope, and it didn't take long for her to confirm that the specimen was Cordyceps. Ratna then asked why they were using chlorazole to prepare the slides. Hidayat told her that they were using chlorazole in preparation for taking samples from the human body. Since Ratna told Hidayat that cordyceps could not survive on the human body, they told her to wear full protective clothing and took her to a quarantine room to examine the body of a woman who had been shot dead. With Hidayat's direction, Ratna immediately examined the bite marks on the victim's body that appeared to have mutated, and asked Hidayat if the bites were really human bites, which Hidayat confirmed. Ratna then examined the victim's mouth and was surprised to find the cordyceps fungus that can live inside the human body. After examining the body, Ratna got information from Hidayat about an incident that happened at a flour and grain factory in the western Jakarta. 30 hours ago, a female worker suddenly lost control and committed an anarchic act by biting her co-workers. The other workers then locked the woman in the bathroom and called the police. However, the police were forced to shoot her dead as she became increasingly violent and tried to attack them. Not only that, her co-workers who were previously bitten by her suddenly became aggressive, just like her, leaving the police with no choice but to shoot them dead before there was any chaos. Upon hearing that, Ratna looked shocked and asked Hidayat about the condition of the other workers. Hidayat then informs her that 14 workers suddenly disappeared and they are still searching for them. Ratna became so frightened that her hands trembled as she realized the gravity of the situation. Hidayat then revealed his purpose for bringing Ratna to the facility, as he intended to assign Ratna to make medicine and vaccines in case the infection caused by the cordyceps fungus spread in Jakarta. However, Ratna emphasized that in all the time she has been doing her job as a mycologist, she has never once found a cure for the infection caused by the cordyceps fungus. Therefore, it is impossible for her to create a vaccine to stop the spread of the infection. Hidayat was visibly shocked by her statement, and in desperation, he asked her about other ways to solve the problem. Surprisingly, Ratna suggested that the Indonesian government should bomb Jakarta and everyone in it, hoping that it would slow down the spread of the infection caused by the cordyceps fungus. With tears in her eyes, Ratna begged Hidayat to take her home, as she hoped to spend the rest of her life with her beloved family before things got worse. In the present, Ellie, who had just woken up, then realized that morning had come. But unexpectedly, Joel pointed his gun at Ellie and threatened to kill her because Ellie had been infected with the cordyceps fungus. However, Ellie seemed to be used to dealing with situations where everyone was trying to kill her, so she then explained to Joel and Tess that she was immune because the bite marks on her hands showed no worsening symptoms, even though she had been bitten 3 weeks ago. Ellie also added that Marlene found her in a bitten state, but Marlene decided not to kill her. Marlene then conducted several tests and isolated Ellie to observe her, and determine whether Ellie would transform into a zombie-like creature like the others. Over time, Ellie showed no symptoms of being infected with the cordyceps fungus, leading Marlene to conclude that Ellie was, somehow, immune to the infection. After revealing the truth to Joel and Tess, Ellie then asked their permission to go to the toilet. After Ellie left, Tess told Joel that Ellie might actually be immune to the infection caused by the cordyceps fungus because Ellie was born after the infection had spread around the world. However, Joel doubted that, because in the past 20 years, he had seen many instances of some people showing symptoms of the infection a little longer than the average person. So he believed that sooner or later, Ellie would definitely show those symptoms and transform into a monster like the others. Therefore, Joel suggested to Tess that they abort the mission and return to the quarantine zone while thinking of another way to get the truck battery. However, Tess, who was optimistic and believed that Ellie was truly immune, confirmed to Joel that they would continue with the mission. Shortly afterward, Tess informs Ellie that they will continue their journey and tells Ellie to have breakfast while offering Ellie a snack. However, Ellie declined the offer and said that Marlene had brought food for her, so that she would not starve along the way. Upon seeing the food that Marlene had prepared for Ellie, Tess realized that Ellie was an important asset to the Fireflies, so Tess became even more convinced that Ellie was truly immune. Tess then approached Ellie and asked about Marlene's purpose in bringing Ellie to that place. Ellie initially refused to explain anything to Joel and Tess because Marlene told her to keep it a secret. But as Tess continues to force her to tell them the truth, Ellie finally reveals that Marlene and the Fireflies intend to make medicine or vaccine from Ellie's blood because they assume that Ellie's blood contains an antibody that can be used to cure infections caused by the cordyceps fungus. However, Joel says that Ellie and the Fireflies are just talking nonsense about vaccines, because until now, no one has been able to make a vaccine to stop the spread of the infection, let alone a cure for people who have been infected. Even so, Tess still trusts Ellie and decides that they will still complete the mission and in hopes that Ellie might become a savior for them all. Since Tess had given her an irrefutable decision, Joel finally agreed to continue the mission. Joel then says that he will not hesitate to shoot Ellie if Ellie so much as twitches, so Ellie then pretends to have a seizure to tease Joel and Tess immediately warns Ellie not to make Joel angry, then tells Ellie to pack her things because they will continue their journey. On the way, they found the ruins of the building blocking their way, so Joel decided to take a detour and stay outside as much as possible to avoid the infected who might hide in the ruins of the building and attack them. Tess then asked Ellie about how Ellie was bitten by the infected, and Ellie explained that a few weeks ago, she sneaked into a mall building in QZ that had been sealed by Fedra, and the infected who were hiding in the building suddenly appeared and bit her. Upon hearing that, Tess also praised Ellie, who she thought was a brave girl, even though Ellie was still 14 years old. Ellie then asked Joel and Tess about some types of the infected that she knew from the rumors, but they refused to explain anything to Ellie and hurried on their way after hearing something. Joel and his companions ended up entering the waterlogged ruins of the hotel building, as they found no other safer way. Ellie, who had been raised in a shelter all her life, was excited when she entered the hotel, and then played around by pretending to be a guest and employee at the hotel. Shortly afterward, Ellie suddenly slips and is surprised to find a skeleton emerging from the water, so Joel rushes to help her. They then headed to the 10th floor by climbing the stairs, but the path they were about to take was blocked by ruins, so Tess took the initiative to find another way and told Joel and Ellie to wait for her at that place. While waiting for Tess, Ellie asks Joel about the lifespan of the infected, and Joel tells Ellie that their lifespan is uncertain and varies from one to another. Furthermore, Joel explained that in general, the infected would survive for 1 to 2 months. However, he has also heard of the infected being able to survive for 20 years. Soon after that, Tess appeared by opening the door behind Ellie and rushed to take Joel and Ellie to see what she found while trying to find another way. Upon seeing that, Ellie looked agitated because this was her first time seeing hordes of the infected. Tess then explains to Ellie that the last time they were here, they only found a few of the infected. Tess deduced that the survivors may have come to the place to seek shelter, but they ended up getting infected and caused the infected colony to grow significantly. Ellie realizes that the infected are connected to each other as they move simultaneously when exposed to sunlight. Tess then explains to her that the infected are indeed connected to each other, and they are also connected to the cordyceps fungus that grows in the ground, which can even reach more than a kilometer in length. Tess then warned Ellie to always watch her step because if she accidentally stepped on an active cordyceps fungus, it would automatically send a signal to lead hordes of the infected to their location. Upon knowing that they could not pass through the road filled with the infected, Joel suggested that they must go to a museum, because on the top floor of the museum there was a path that they could cross to get to their destination. Upon arriving at the museum, Joel examined the cordyceps fungus that covered the entire side of the museum building and found that the fungus had died and dried up. Upon knowing that, Joel and Tess then prepare themselves to face attacks from the infected who might be hiding in the museum and tell Ellie to stay alert. While walking through the museum with only the light from a flashlight, they found a male body with fresh scratch wounds. Joel and Tess, who saw the scars, immediately slowed down their voices because they could guess the type of infected that inhabited the place from the scars on the man's body. Joel then told Ellie to stay quiet and not make any noise as they climbed the stairs to the upper floor. They finally made it to the top floor without making a sound that could attract the infected. But unexpectedly, the ceiling in the room suddenly collapsed and made a noise which then provoked the arrival of clickers, the blind infected who rely on their hearing to launch attacks. Joel and the others rushed to save themselves to avoid the attack from the clickers, until they became separated from each other. Joel managed to distract the clicker so that Ellie could hide, while he reloaded his weapon to launch the next attack. After an intense fight, they finally managed to kill the clickers, and Ellie seemed calm when she found out that she had been bitten by the infected for the second time. Joel then sends Ellie across to the next building first, while he tries to help Tess, who sprained her leg while trying to escape from the clickers. Knowing that Ellie had been bitten twice, Joel was hesitant to continue the mission, but Tess tries to convince him that Ellie is completely immune. Joel then approached Ellie, who seemed fascinated to see the view of the State House from a distance. However, because it was already afternoon, Tess told them to hurry up and continue their journey so that they could arrive at the State House before nightfall. On the way to the State House, Joel silently observes Ellie's injured arm and wonders if Ellie is really immune or if she takes a little longer than most people before she transforms into a zombie-like creature. Long story short, they finally arrived at the State House and found none of the Fireflies standing guard outside. Realizing there was something wrong, Tess rushed Ellie inside and found the Fireflies dead. Some of them had also been infected, and it was only a matter of time before they were fully transformed into monsters. Upon knowing that, Tess immediately became panicked and rushed to find a clue, map or radio, so that they could immediately hand over Ellie and get their reward. Seeing Tess outraged that their mission was not going according to plan, Joel and Ellie immediately concluded that Tess was infected. Tess finally shows the bite marks on her neck and explains that she was bitten by the clicker while trying to escape from the museum. Tess then had Ellie show her bite marks, and it was clear that the bite marks had faded, which indicated that Ellie was immune. Trembling, Tess then asks Joel to take Ellie to their allies, Bill and Frank, who are located in Lincoln, Massachusetts. Tess begs Joel to protect Ellie as her last request, as Ellie is the only real hope for Joel and the other survivors to stop the pandemic. Joel seems indecisive, but he knows that he has no choice but to continue the mission and escort Ellie to the Fireflies. At the same time, an infected man suddenly rose up and was about to attack them, but Joel managed to kill him. But unfortunately, the man had touched an active cordyceps fungus, which sent a signal indicating their location to hordes of the infected, so Joel told them to hurry up and leave the place. However, Tess decided to sacrifice herself by blowing up the building, so that Joel and Ellie could save themselves. After Tess prepares the explosives to destroy the herd of the infected that will soon come to attack the place, Tess then tells Joel to keep Ellie alive. Soon after that, Joel and Ellie finally made it out of the building, right before Tess blew herself up with the infected swarming around her. Sometime later, Joel and Ellie continued their journey and decided to rest in a forest. Joel then went to the river to clean himself, and he still looked devastated by the loss of Tess, who was his partner for the past few years. When Joel returned, he found Ellie, who had woken up, and the girl also still seemed devastated by Tess's death. Ellie actually refused to leave Tess alone, but Joel rushed to drag her out of the building before the infected swarm attacked them. Even so, Ellie tries to get along with Joel, who has ignored her since they left Tess. Even Ellie also tried to invite Joel to chat and initiate conversation several times, but Joel did not respond at all. An annoyed Ellie then tells Joel that so far, no one has forced Joel and Tess to take her to her destination or forced Joel to continue the mission. Therefore, Joel should not blame her for something that is not her fault, because Joel and Tess have made their own decision when accepting the offer from Marlene to escort her. Upon hearing that, Joel realized his mistake and finally started talking to Ellie by telling her to get ready because they were going to continue their journey. On the way, Ellie then asked Joel about Bill and Frank because Tess told Joel to bring Ellie to their place. Joel explains that he and Tess often visit Bill and Frank's place to barter logistical needs and tells Ellie that Frank is a good man. Ellie, who was curious to hold a gun, tried to convince Joel to give her a gun, but Joel immediately rejected the idea because Ellie was still a child. After a few hours of walking, Joel and Ellie arrive at a farming area, and Joel then enters an abandoned shop to retrieve the supplies that he hid in the shop. Joel and Tess usually hide supplies along their route in case they run out of equipment. Inside the store, Ellie seems excited to find an arcade game and pretends to play the game even though it is broken. While Joel is still trying to find the supplies he hid a few years ago, Ellie decides to look around the other rooms for something they might still be able to use, even though Joel has already told her that there is nothing there. Shortly afterward, Ellie found a door that led to the basement and intended to check inside without telling Joel, who was still having trouble finding the supplies he had hidden. Relying only on the light of a flashlight, Ellie enters the basement and seems happy when she finds a box of tampons. At the same time, Ellie heard someone growling and was surprised to find a runner crushed under the rubble. Runners are people who recently turned into infected, and judging by his appearance, the runner would be clickers who rely on their hearing to attack. Seeing the runner who's moaning in pain, Ellie decided to end his suffering by killing him. On the other hand, Joel finally managed to find the supplies he was hiding and started calling Ellie. Because Ellie did not answer after a few times he called her, Joel took his weapon and intended to check the situation. Shortly afterward, Ellie appeared and told Joel that she got something she could still use, then put the tampon in her bag. Ellie looks shocked when Joel decides to keep one of his weapons in the store, and Joel only tells her that the ammunition for the weapon is rarely found out there, so the weapon is not very useful for them. Even so, Joel refuses to give the weapon to Ellie, so Ellie becomes upset. They continued their journey and found the wreckage of a plane on a hill. Ellie looks dumbfounded at the wreckage and then asks Joel if he has ever been on a plane. Joel told her that he had been on a plane several times and actually he didn't really like it. On the way, Ellie asks Joel about the origin of the cordyceps fungal infection that spread so quickly and brought down the community in just a short time. Ellie also wonders about who first spread the infection and assumes that cordyceps originally infected a monkey and the monkey bit a human until finally the infection spread around the world. Joel then explained that he also did not know for sure about the first spread of the cordyceps fungus infection. However, Joel estimated that the cordyceps fungus had mutated and some of it got into the food supply, such as flour, which was then used as the raw material for bread, cereal, and pancake batter that sold around the world. Until one day, people who ate food made from the flour started to get sick and infected, then attacked other people and spread the infection quickly. Upon learning that, Ellie replied that Joel's explanation made sense and thanked Joel for telling her everything. Soon after that, Joel suddenly realized something and stopped his steps. Joel then invites Ellie to take a detour through the forest because there is something in front of them that Ellie shouldn't see. Instead of following Joel's advice, the curious Ellie continued to move forward because she wanted to know something that Joel wanted to hide from her. Ellie also didn't feel the least bit afraid because Joel had made sure that what they would find in front of them wasn't something that could hurt Ellie. However, how surprised Ellie was to find a collection of human skeletons in a large hole that was deliberately dug to dispose of the bodies. Joel then explains that the soldiers evacuated the residents of the small town a few days after the infection spread rapidly in the United States and took them to the quarantine zone if there was still enough space to accommodate them. If the capacity of the quarantine zone was full and they had no other shelters, then the soldiers would execute the residents. Ellie was very shocked and angry when she found out about this fact and asked Joel why they had to be executed when they were not infected. Joel then replies that dead people cannot be infected by the cordyceps fungus. The scene then switches to the past and shows soldiers evacuating the citizens in a small town and about to take them to the quarantine zone. When everyone gathered outside the house and prepared to leave the small town, a man named Bill was still inside the house and secretly observing them through CCTV cameras. Bill seemed to refuse to be evacuated and had prepared his weapons, in case he had to get into a shootout with the soldiers who had entered his house to find his whereabouts. Luckily, Bill had hidden in the basement of his house before the arrival of the soldiers, so they were unable to find him. Bill, who had quite a lot of supplies and weapons, then came out of his house and found that he was the only person living in the small town after the soldiers evacuated the other residents. Bill, who seemed to have quite a lot of knowledge about survival in the face of a precarious situation, then began to prepare everything, such as collecting supplies, containing fuel that could be used for vehicles, starting the power plant engine, and also preparing several traps around his residence to get rid of people who had been infected. Not only that, Bill also planted vegetables and fruits and also set up a farm in preparation for long-term survival, because he could not be sure when the pandemic would end. Bill, who is a true survivalist, finally managed to establish the independent settlement in just a short time. 4 years later, Bill, who was repairing equipment, was surprised by an alarm that warned him that someone was trapped in a pit outside the fence of his residence. As Bill was about to check into the hole, he saw a man who told him that he was not infected. The man then introduced himself as Frank and told Bill that he was trying to escape from the runners who had destroyed his independent settlement before he fell into the hole. Bill then brought a ladder so that Frank could get out of the hole, while examining Frank to make sure that he was not infected. Even though Bill had confirmed Frank was not infected, Bill still kicked Frank out of his territory. Frank then begged Bill to give him some food because he was starving and promised that he would leave immediately after eating. Bill finally agreed to let Frank stay for a meal and even allowed Frank to take a shower and gave Frank some clean clothes. In the end, Frank never left Bill's place and they became lovers who looked after each other. 3 years later, Frank and Bill got into an argument because Frank was unhappy with Bill, who was too ignorant about the nice views, making the neighborhood look shabby and unkempt. However, Bill insisted that the nice view was not important when it came to survival, even though Frank disagreed with him. Frank tried to persuade Bill to give him some equipment and promised that he would renovate the whole place by himself as long as Bill fulfilled his request. Not wanting to argue further with Frank, Bill finally complied with Frank's request while asking why Frank wanted to clean and renovate the place. Frank finally revealed that they might have some survivors that he had found through the radio and Frank had invited them to their settlement. Apparently, the survivors found by Frank were Joel and Tess, who then came to visit their place to enjoy a delicious lunch with a beautiful view, which Joel and Tess could not find in the quarantine zone. Frank welcomes Joel and Tess in a very friendly manner, while Bill remains vigilant and does not hesitate to point a gun at Joel while they are enjoying lunch. Frank then invited Tess into the house, while Joel tried to convince Bill that they were good people trying to survive. Joel also adds that they have items that Bill doesn't have, such as medicine and machine parts, so Joel offers to barter so that they can help each other to get the supplies they need. Before leaving, Joel warned Bill and Frank about the looters, but Bill felt confident that the looters would not be able to break through his defenses. One night, a group of looters were seen approaching Bill's settlement and tried to break into the place. Bill, who was warned of the looters' arrival, rushed to grab his gun and put up a fight. Luckily, Bill was able to get rid of the looters, although Bill had to get injured in the process. Frank rushed Bill into the house and tried to treat Bill's gunshot wound with makeshift equipment, until finally he managed to save Bill's life. 10 years later, Bill and Frank were still living in that place, but Frank's health condition had deteriorated, so Frank had to sit on a wheelchair. Even so, Bill still took care of Frank sincerely and lovingly, because Frank was his one and only partner who was very dear to him. One day, Frank told Bill that his life might not be long and asked Bill to keep his spirits up. Upon hearing that, Bill couldn't hold back his tears, especially when he realized that Frank might soon leave him forever. In the present, Joel and Ellie finally arrive at Bill's settlement, and find that the place has become rundown and unkempt since Joel last visited the place a few years ago. Joel, who already knows the access code to open the front gate, can easily enter the place and take Ellie to Bill's house. Arriving at Bill's house, Joel was startled to see the deserted and neglected state of the house, as if it had been abandoned by its residents for a long time. Joel intends to check the situation in the house and tells Ellie to wait downstairs. As Joel climbs the stairs to the top floor, Ellie goes into the living room and finds a letter addressed to Joel. When Joel returned, Ellie told Joel that Bill had written a letter to him. Upon hearing that, Joel assumes that Bill and Frank are dead, so he then becomes sad and devastated, and asks Ellie to read the letter. In his letter, Bill tells Joel not to enter his room and allows Joel to take all the supplies and weapons in the place. Bill then ended his letter by asking Joel to always keep Tess safe. Unfortunately, Joel could not fulfill Bill's last request because Tess had already passed away. Soon after that, Joel checked the garage at Bill's house and found a car that was still quite good. Not only the car, Bill had also prepared a battery for the car. After that, Joel approached Ellie and asked her to show him her scars while telling Ellie that she had to obey 3 rules if she wanted to continue traveling with him. First, Joel forbids Ellie to talk about Tess. Secondly, Joel forbids Ellie to show the bite marks to anyone because they will definitely kill Ellie once they see the bite marks. The last rule, Ellie must obey everything he says. Since Ellie has no choice but to travel with Joel, Ellie complies with all 3 rules. Joel tells Ellie that he intends to find the whereabouts of his brother, Tommy, and try to find information about the Fireflies' headquarters in other regions so that he can escort Ellie to the Fireflies and complete his mission. Joel then took Ellie to the basement in Bill's house, and Ellie seemed dumbfounded at the weaponry owned by Bill, to the point that Ellie called Bill a genius. Seeing the many weapons owned by Bill, Ellie tried to persuade Joel to give her a weapon for defense, but Joel refused Ellie's request. When Joel is collecting the supplies they need, Ellie accidentally finds Frank's gun in a drawer in the dining room and secretly puts the gun in her bag. After getting the supplies and weapons they need, Joel and Ellie then get into Bill's car and prepare to continue their journey to find Tommy's whereabouts. Sometime later, Joel and Ellie decide to stop at an abandoned gas station, where Joel tries to get fuel from several cars in the place, while Ellie seems excited about the gun she found at Bill's house. Ellie began to act out by pointing the gun in front of the mirror, as if she was a police about to arrest a criminal. Upon realizing that she had been there too long and Joel might be looking for her soon, Ellie quickly put the gun in her bag and then approached Joel. Ellie seems impressed to see how Joel transfers fuel from the gas tank of a car to a jerrycan. Joel tells her that he will teach Ellie this method, so that Ellie can also do it if at any time Ellie is traveling alone and needs fuel. Ellie then tries to make Joel laugh by reading some jokes from a book she found, but Joel doesn't respond to the jokes at all and instead tells Ellie to wait for him in the car. After refueling their vehicle, Joel and Ellie continue their journey to Wyoming to find Tommy. A few hours later, Joel decides to call it a day and turns the car towards the forest, where they will spend the night before continuing their journey tomorrow morning. Joel then cooked dinner for them using the ingredients they found at Bill's house. Ellie seemed to eat her dinner with gusto while praising Bill as a great man for being well prepared for any situation. Bill had even prepared everything for Joel before he passed away. Joel also agrees with Ellie because he has never met anyone other than Bill who has a very complete preparation in any situation. Since they were going to spend the night in the forest, Ellie suggested that they make a bonfire. But Joel firmly rejects that, warning Ellie that building a campfire could attract something more violent than the infected to come towards them. Joel turns out to be discussing bandits who will not hesitate to kill survivors who try to survive by looting their supplies and weapons. Upon learning that, Ellie nodded her understanding and obeyed what Joel told her. Before going to bed, Ellie reads the book she found by relying on the flashlight and tries to make a fool of Joel by mentioning a joke question she found in the book. Surprisingly, Joel found out about the joke and managed to answer Ellie's question correctly. Ellie looks peevish because Joel knows the answer, but Joel secretly smiles happily because he is amused by Ellie's joke. Joel then tells Ellie to sleep, because tomorrow they will be leaving early in the morning. While Ellie had fallen asleep, the ever-vigilant Joel had trouble sleeping, so he decided to stay up all night. The following day, Ellie woke up to find Joel packing up their things. Ellie actually wanted to sleep longer, but Joel told her to get ready because they would be leaving soon. On the way, Ellie, who was reading a map, then asked about Joel's younger brother, Tommy. At first, Joel refused to tell Ellie about Tommy, but Ellie managed to convince Joel to start talking about Tommy. Joel told Ellie that Tommy was a former soldier who had been on a mission in Iraq, before he finally retired and tried to get a job when the cordyceps fungal infection began to spread. Joel adds that Tommy had joined the Fireflies at Marlene's persuasion, but Joel was informed that Tommy had decided to leave the Fireflies. Therefore, Joel thinks that Tommy is currently alone out there, so he is determined to find Tommy. Ellie asks Joel what if he didn't manage to find Tommy, but Joel insists that he will find Tommy no matter what, because he is a persistent person. Joel intends to go to the radio tower in Cody where Tommy last delivered a message to him, and if Tommy is not in that place, Joel plans to look for Tommy in the residential area of the survivors around the radio tower. A few hours later, Joel and Ellie arrive at a highway that has been blocked, so Joel is forced to stop his car. Joel tells Ellie to wait in the car while he checks the situation near the tunnel. Joel tries to look into the tunnel and finds nothing in there, which makes Joel even more suspicious and alert, because the enemy they will face ahead there might be worse than the infected. Joel decided to take a shortcut by going around the bridge, instead of looking for an alternative route because they had to save fuel. After walking through the uninhabited streets of the city, Joel and Ellie find Fedra's quarantine zone, which has been ravaged and abandoned. Soon after that, Joel and Ellie encountered a man who was injured and asked for help, but Joel decided to leave the place immediately instead of helping him. At the same time, someone deliberately dropped a chunk of concrete block onto the windshield of Joel's car and installed tire killers to deflate his tires, making it difficult for Joel to control his car, and crashed into a shop. Joel, who had predicted that the city had been overrun by bandits, immediately grabbed his gun and told Ellie to hide while he would fight the bandits. Joel managed to knock out several bandits, but a bandit named Brian took advantage of the opportunity to approach Joel secretly when Joel was involved in a shootout against his group. At the same time, Ellie saw Brian trying to kill Joel, so she then ventured to shoot at Brian using Frank's gun. The wounded Brian begged Ellie not to kill him, even he also offered supplies if Ellie spared his life. Joel seemed surprised to see Ellie holding a gun, so he got up and asked Ellie to hand over the gun to him, then told Ellie to return to her hiding place. Ellie, who was still in shock because this was her first time using a firearm, then heard Brian scream just before Joel killed him. Shortly afterward, Joel immediately takes Ellie to leave the place and find a hiding place before Brian's comrades arrive to take revenge on them. The scene then switches and shows a woman named Kathleen, who is the leader of a revolutionary movement in Kansas City that houses Brian and his comrades. Kathleen is seen interrogating an old man named Edelstein for information on the whereabouts of a man named Henry Burrell who killed her brother. Although Edelstein has confirmed that he has no knowledge of Henry's whereabouts, Kathleen believes that Edelstein is deliberately lying to her to protect Henry. Kathleen did not even hesitate to put her gun to Edelstein's head in order to get information about Henry. Not getting any information from Edelstein, Kathleen then went outside and found Brian and his comrades who were killed. Kathleen then asked her right-hand man, Perry, about the killer, and Perry informed her that the killer was probably the Outsiders, because his team found a vehicle full of goods and confirmed that the vehicle did not belong to Fedra, even though they were heavily supplied. Upon learning that, Kathleen then made a statement to her followers by saying that the death of Brian and his comrades was Henry's doing and ordered them to kill anyone who was not part of their group without exception. Soon after that, Perry led an armed force to conduct a house-to-house hunt to find the Outsiders who had caused Brian and his comrades to lose their lives. On the other hand, Joel and Ellie, who were hiding in an abandoned bar, soon learned that they were being hunted by a revolutionary group calling themselves the People. Joel and Ellie intend to hide in a tall building a few blocks away, but they have to wait until the situation becomes safe enough for them to start moving towards the building. While waiting, Joel discusses the actions taken by Ellie to help him and explains to Ellie that he deliberately prohibited Ellie from carrying a weapon, because he did not want Ellie to feel guilty and burdened after hurting others with the weapon. Ellie does not deny that initially she felt shocked and could not stem her tears. However, Ellie then revealed to Joel that this was not the first time she had hurt someone else. Although her feelings are uncertain after hurting or killing others, Ellie thinks that they have no choice but to make this difficult decision in order to save themselves and also the people they care about. Upon hearing that, Joel realizes that Ellie is mature enough to make a decision, so he hands Frank's gun back to Ellie and lets her use it to defend herself. Ellie seemed happy that Joel finally allowed her to use a firearm, especially since Joel also taught her the right way to use the gun. After making sure that the situation was safe enough for them to move, Joel immediately told Ellie to get ready because they would soon leave the place. In the meantime, Perry approached Kathleen and showed her an attic that was thought to be Henry's hiding place before he left the place because he ran out of food supplies. Kathleen then concluded that Henry must be planning to steal their food supplies, so she then ordered Perry to increase security at the food supply warehouse. Perry then took Kathleen to a room where the ground seemed to be pulsating and cracking open. Perry, worried about their safety, advised Kathleen to reveal it to everyone and lead the evacuation to a safer place. However, Kathleen didn't seem to care much about the cracks, as their top priority was to find Henry and the outsiders who had killed Brian and his comrades. Before leaving, Kathleen ordered Perry to close the building and tighten the guard, so that no one could infiltrate the place for their own safety. Meanwhile, Joel and Ellie finally arrive at a tall building that they will use as a hideout. However, Joel soon becomes exhausted when he has to climb the stairs because the building has more than 30 floors and the elevator has not worked since the building was abandoned. Since Joel no longer had the energy to climb the stairs, they decided to hide in a room on the 33rd floor. Joel then told Ellie to tidy up the place they were going to sleep in, while he scattered broken glass near the doors and windows in case someone snuck into the place. However, Ellie seems to doubt that, because she realizes that Joel's right side hearing is impaired, so Joel might not be able to hear well. Before going to bed, Joel and Ellie had a conversation and Ellie tried to make a fool of Joel by asking a joke question. This time, Ellie manages to fool Joel with the joke and they both end up laughing together, which indicates that Joel and Ellie are becoming closer. In the middle of the night, Joel and Ellie, who have just woken up, are surprised by the appearance of Henry and his younger brother, Sam, who point their guns at Joel and Ellie. The scene then switches and shows the situation in Kansas City 11 days before Joel and Ellie's arrival. At that time, a group of revolutionary rebels who called themselves the People were seen celebrating their victory because they managed to defeat the Federal soldiers and take over Kansas City from the authority. However, in the midst of the night's festivities, Henry and his younger brother, Sam, were seen hiding from the revolutionary rebels who were targeting them. Henry tries to calm the deaf Sam by using sign language, then takes Sam to hurry to leave the place. On the other hand, Kathleen manages to gather several people who conspired with Fedra and locked them up. Kathleen then interrogated them to find information about Henry and Sam's whereabouts. One of them then told Kathleen that he had seen Henry and Sam a few blocks away in the city center, but he couldn't confirm their location. Upon hearing that, Kathleen immediately ordered Perry to mobilize the troops to go to the center of the city and comb all the blocks to find Henry and Sam's whereabouts. However, Perry told Kathleen that the search would be quite difficult because they were short of personnel. Even so, Kathleen doesn't seem to care and insists that they must find Henry and Sam's whereabouts immediately and execute the brothers in front of everyone. Meanwhile, Henry took Sam to an abandoned building to meet Edelstein, who was waiting for them. Edelstein then takes Henry and Sam to the attic that will be their hiding place for the time being, and provides food supplies for a few days until they find a way out that is safe enough to leave the city. Edelstein told Henry that he could only steal some canned food from the food supply warehouse and failed to get the bullets requested by Henry because they had a very tight guard at the armory. Henry didn't seem to mind and told Edelstein that as much as possible, he didn't want to get into a firefight with the rebels because their escape plan would be done secretly by sneaking through the waterways under the city. Henry also estimated that they could at least survive for 11 days with the food supplies they currently had. Henry then approached Sam, who was cowering in the corner of the room, and tried to reassure Sam that the place was very safe for them, so Sam no longer needed to be afraid. Henry also gave a pack of crayons to Sam, who had a hobby of drawing, to make Sam happy. 10 days later, Henry watches outside through the window and finds the rebels still patrolling the streets of Kansas City on the orders of Kathleen, who is ambitious to capture him. On the other hand, Sam starts to starve as their food supply is running out, but Henry asks him to be patient while waiting for Edelstein, who has not returned since a few days ago. At night, Henry, who was desperate because Edelstein had not returned and assumed that he had been captured by the rebels, decided to leave the place. The following day, Henry woke Sam up and told him that Edelstein would not return, so they had to leave the place to find food supplies. Sam, worried about the old man, asked Henry if Edelstein was dead. Henry replied that Edelstein had probably been captured by the rebels and executed, so he could not return to them. Sam looked sad to hear this, but Henry immediately hugged his beloved brother and tried to calm Sam down, saying that he would always protect Sam and would never leave Sam no matter what. Henry then applied paint around Sam's eyes, hoping that it would make Sam feel better because Henry wanted Sam to become a superhero like Sam's dream all this time. As they were about to leave the building, Henry and Sam were surprised by the gunfire outside, so they decided to wait inside until it was safe. Henry tries to find out about what really happened and sees the rebels involved in a shootout with the outsider, who is none other than Joel. Henry, who saw Joel's ability in a fight, then got an idea and told Sam that there was a slight change of plan. On the other hand, Edelstein was apparently captured by the rebels and was being interrogated by Kathleen, who asked about the whereabouts of Henry and Sam. However, Edelstein chose to remain silent by telling Kathleen that he was completely unaware of Henry and Sam's whereabouts. At the same time, Kathleen gets news of a shootout that kills several rebels, then becomes angry and concludes that Henry, somehow, got help from the outsiders, so she then returns to Edelstein's prison cell and shoots the old man dead for conspiring with Henry. Later that night, Henry and Sam sneak into the building where Joel and Ellie are hiding. They step on the broken glass in front of the door, but fortunately, they don't wake Joel and Ellie, who are fast asleep. Henry then gave a gun without bullets to Sam and told Sam to point the gun at Joel, so that they could negotiate with Joel and Ellie, who were the outsiders. Shortly afterward, Joel and Ellie suddenly woke up and realized the presence of Henry and Sam, who threatened them at gunpoint. Henry then tells Joel and Ellie not to fight back because they only want to work with Joel and Ellie. After making sure that Joel and Ellie would not put up a fight, Henry then introduced himself and Sam while telling Joel that he was the most wanted man in the city, and that Joel was probably ranked second as the most wanted man in the city after Joel killed several rebels who attacked him. Henry tells Sam that he trusts Joel and Ellie, and then lowers his weapon to convince them that he really wants to work with them to get out of the city. Joel and Ellie then introduced themselves and shared their food with Henry and Sam, who were very grateful that they were willing to share their food, even though they didn't have much food supplies left after getting into a firefight with the rebels. The next day, as they were observing the city from the top floor, Henry told Joel that the rebels had managed to overthrow Fedra's rule in the city and gain their freedom. Joel pointed out that he had heard about Fedra in the city being known as barbarians, because they often tortured and killed people, and Henry confirmed this, until finally the people fought back and managed to defeat them. Henry then revealed that he was a collaborator, and Joel immediately refused to work with him because Henry was a traitor. However, Henry tells Joel that Joel will need him as a guide so they can get out of the city, while he needs Joel's fighting skills to protect them. Henry also added that his gun had no bullets, so he could not defend himself and Sam. Joel was actually reluctant to cooperate with Henry, but when he knew that Sam was only 8 years old and the rebels would not hesitate to kill the boy, Joel then asked about the way they got out of the city. Before telling them how, Henry asks Joel and Ellie about the strangeness of the town, and Ellie replies that they haven't seen the infected since they arrived. Henry tells them that Fedra herded the infected underground and managed to keep them underground for the past 15 years, since it was impossible for them to escape through the highway that was heavily guarded by Kathleen's henchmen. Henry then informed them about a maintenance tunnel under the city that connected to a residential area directly adjacent to a river that became the outermost point of the Kansas City. Upon learning that, Joel then asked if Henry had ever entered the tunnel because they might encounter the infected in the tunnel. Henry openly said that he had never entered the tunnel, but a Fedra soldier had told him that the tunnel was completely empty and safe enough to pass through. Since Kathleen and her henchmen thought that the infected were still roaming underground, Henry believed that they wouldn't encounter the rebels in the tunnel. Before entering the tunnel, Joel tells Ellie to prepare to use her weapon and tells Henry and Sam to be ready to run if something bad happens. Upon entering the tunnel, Henry seems happy to find that the tunnel is completely empty, just as he thought it would be. But Joel reminds them to stay alert as they know nothing about the place. After walking down the tunnel for a while, Joel and the others arrived at a room that used to be a children's school, as the walls were covered with drawings and there were some toys and books in the place. Joel mentioned that he had heard about the survivors setting up independent settlements underground, but they didn't follow the rules, so they became infected. Ellie and Sam are excited when they find a comic book that is their favorite, so Ellie tries to learn sign language so that she can communicate more easily with Sam. Ellie then begged Joel to let them rest for a while in that place, and Henry also assured Joel that they would be safer out of the tunnel at night. Ellie and Sam seem happy while spending time by playing around in that place, while Joel and Henry have a serious conversation where Henry reveals to Joel that he was forced to become a traitor in order to save Sam, who has leukemia. Henry explains that Fedra has medicine that is effective enough to cure Sam, but Fedra wants a large fee if Henry wants the medicine. Henry decides to betray Michael, the leader of a revolutionary movement, who is also Kathleen's brother, by telling his hiding place to Fedra in order to save Sam. As a result of his betrayal, Fedra managed to kill Michael, so Kathleen and the other rebels were very ambitious to kill Henry to avenge Michael's death. Upon learning that, Joel could only remain silent and then told Ellie and Sam to prepare because they would soon leave the place. Long story short, Joel and the others finally got out of the tunnel and arrived at the abandoned residential area as mentioned by Henry. Henry thought that his plan was going smoothly because they didn't face any problems at all, until suddenly they were surprised by a sniper who shot at them from a house. Joel immediately told Ellie and the others to hide, while he would sneak into the house through the back door to kill the sniper. After dealing with the sniper, who turned out to be an old man, Joel immediately told him to lower his weapon because Joel was reluctant to kill the old man. However, the old man ignored Joel's warning and intended to shoot him, so Joel had no choice but to kill him. At the same time, Joel realized that the old man had reported them to Kathleen and her men who were on their way to the location. Joel rushed to warn Ellie and the others to run while trying to protect them from the rebels who had just arrived at the location. Unfortunately, Henry and the others were eventually surrounded by Kathleen and the armed rebels, so Henry then decided to surrender as long as Kathleen let Sam and Ellie escape. However, Kathleen refused to do so because Ellie was with the man who had killed her men, while Sam was Henry's younger brother who was a traitor. Kathleen, who seems to have no mercy like her brother, then emphasizes to Henry that she will not hesitate to kill anyone, including children, if they betray her. Upon hearing that, Henry then asks Ellie to take Sam away from the place, while he will try to distract Kathleen and her men. Just as Kathleen was about to kill Henry, the ground near them suddenly collapsed and formed a large hole. At the same time, a herd of the infected came out of the ground and immediately attacked Kathleen and her men. Amidst the chaos, Henry tries to get Ellie and Sam away from the place with the help of Joel, who shoots at anyone who tries to block them. However, the clickers manage to knock Ellie down and separate her from Henry and Sam, who had escaped first. From a distance, Joel tried to help Ellie by killing them, so Ellie managed to get into a car and hide in that place. Unfortunately, a child infected learns of Ellie's presence and enters the car, so Ellie is forced to get out of the car and find Henry and Sam, who are overwhelmed by the herd of the infected trying to attack them. At the same time, Joel seemed to know Ellie's way of thinking, so he then opened the way for Ellie so that Ellie could save Henry and Sam, who were trapped under the car. Since her gun was out of bullets, Ellie used her knife to kill the infected and managed to save Henry and Sam. In the meantime, Perry and Kathleen are surprised by the appearance of the bloater, the rarest and the most dangerous stage of the infected. Harry then told Kathleen to hurry up and escape, while he would try to fight the bloater, although it was impossible for him to defeat the creature because the bloater's body was covered by thick fungus that effectively acts as armor plates. Unfortunately, Perry had to lose his life while facing the bloater that could easily kill him. Meanwhile, Henry and the others who tried to escape from the chaos were confronted by Kathleen, who threatened them at gunpoint. However, an infected suddenly emerged from the well and immediately attacked Kathleen, so Joel then told them to hurry up and leave the place. Joel and the others finally managed to escape and decided to hide in a motel. In the room, Ellie realizes that Sam has been infected, so she then shows the bite marks on her arm while telling Sam that her blood is medicine. Ellie then cuts her hand until it bleeds, then applies the blood to the bite wound on Sam's leg, hoping that her blood can cure the infection before it spreads throughout the body and turns Sam into a monster. Sam then asks Ellie to keep the bite a secret from Joel and Henry, and Ellie agrees not to tell them anything. The next day, surprisingly, Sam transforms into the infected and immediately attacks Ellie. At the same time, Joel tries to save Ellie, but Henry grabs his gun first and threatens Joel at gunpoint. Unexpectedly, Henry spontaneously shot Sam in the head and looked shocked when he realized that he had killed his little brother. Joel tried to calm Henry down as he asked him to hand over the gun, but Henry, who had lost hope after Sam's death, then decided to end his life. Before continuing their journey to Wyoming, Joel and Ellie decided to bury Henry and Sam's bodies side by side. Ellie seemed to be very sad and devastated by Sam's death because she wrote an apology message and placed it on Sam's grave. 3 months after Henry and Sam's death, in winter, Joel and Ellie finally arrive in Wyoming and meet an old man named Marlon who lives with his wife, Florence, in a cabin in the middle of the forest. Joel then asks Marlon about Tommy while threatening Florence at gunpoint. Surprisingly, despite Joel pointing a gun at her, Florence doesn't seem to be afraid of Joel and instead makes hot soup for Joel and Ellie to warm up their bodies. Marlon, who realized that Joel would not hurt them because Joel was only trying to find information about his brother, then told Joel about their current location, because Joel and Ellie apparently lost their way after they left Cody. Marlon tells Joel that all the settlements near the area have been destroyed, so the only way for Tommy to escape is to cross the river if he is still alive. However, Florence adds that Tommy would already be dead if he crossed the river, as anyone who tried to cross the river would instantly be killed by something living on the other side of the river. Despite being warned by Marlon and Florence about the dangers they might face across the river, Joel is still determined to find Tommy, who is the only one of his family left. Moreover, Joel also needed Tommy's help to find the fireflies so that he could complete his mission by escorting Ellie to the fireflies as requested by Marlene. Unexpectedly, Joel suddenly had a panic attack that made him short of breath and remembered the painful trauma in the past. Ellie then asked about Joel's condition, who seemed to be holding pain in his chest, but Joel managed to convince Ellie that he was fine, so they then continued their journey to the river. After traveling on foot for several hours, Joel and Ellie decide to spend the night in a cave by the river and continue their journey by crossing the river the next day. Later that night, Joel tried to fix his broken boot by wrapping duct tape around it, while Ellie seemed to be enjoying the view of the aurora in the night sky. Joel then tells Ellie to come down because her neck could be broken if Ellie falls from such a height. They then engage in a conversation about their future plans if Marlene and Fireflies succeed in creating something to cure the infection. Joel tells Ellie that he will probably spend the rest of his life in an old farmhouse, while Ellie apparently dreams of becoming an astronaut and going into space. Ellie then reveals to Joel that she tried to cure Sam by applying her blood to Sam's bite wound, but it failed. Upon hearing that, Joel tells Ellie that the process is not that simple and Marlene must know the right way. Joel then told Ellie to sleep, while he would keep watch all night. But unexpectedly, Joel woke up the next morning and found Ellie standing guard in front of the cave holding his gun. Ellie told Joel that she woke up in the middle of the night and found Joel asleep, so she decided to stand guard. Upon hearing that, Joel apologizes to Ellie as he asks for his weapon back, then tells Ellie to wake him up if at any time Ellie finds him asleep again. Joel and Ellie then continued their journey by crossing the river using a bridge and did not encounter any obstacles along the way. Ellie could even enjoy the trip by learning to whistle until they finally find a dam on the other side of the river. Joel tells Ellie that they used to build the dam to get electricity, but he has no idea how it works. After walking quite a distance from the dam, Ellie sees the other side of the river and assumes that the river they are crossing is the river referred to as the River of Death by Marlon and Florence. Upon hearing that, Joel immediately checked it on the map and took Ellie to leave the place immediately. At the same time, a group of horsemen appeared and threatened them at gunpoint. Joel tries to convince the horsemen that they are just passing by and will leave soon. However, a man who seemed to be the leader of the group then ordered a trained dog to check their condition. The man said that the dog could identify infected people by their smell and would not hesitate to attack and tear them apart. The dog then approached Joel and sniffed him for a while before passing him by since Joel was not infected. But Joel soon became worried when the dog sniffed Ellie, and Ellie was afraid that the dog knew she was infected despite being immune to the infection. Surprisingly, the dog does not attack Ellie at all and instead licks her, which indicates that Ellie is not a dangerous enemy to them. Joel then told the horsemen that he was looking for his brother, and after Joel said his name, they immediately took Joel and Ellie to their independent settlement in Jackson. Upon arrival, Joel and Ellie are amazed to see the small and thriving community preparing to celebrate Christmas. Surprisingly, Joel finds Tommy working on a construction site and immediately calls him. On the other hand, Tommy seems surprised to see his brother after a long time and rushes over to Joel. Both seem very relieved and happy when they finally met and hugged each other with great emotion. Tommy and a woman named Maria, who is one of the board members in the community, then took Joel and Ellie to a restaurant, where they were served a really delicious and proper meal. Ellie said that this was the first time she had eaten such a delicious and proper meal after months of traveling with little food. Ellie then yelled at a girl who was watching her secretly and asked Tommy why the girl was looking at her like that. Maria explains that children in Jackson rarely meet outsiders, so they become curious to see children like Ellie who are the outsiders. Joel then reprimands Ellie and tells her to behave, but Maria and Tommy apologize to them because they rarely allow outsiders to enter their community to protect the people in the community from any dangers out there, such as the infected and bandits. After lunch, Joel asks Maria for some time so that he can talk alone with Tommy as family. Surprisingly, Tommy tells Joel that Maria is family because Maria is his wife. Upon hearing that, Ellie congratulated them on their marriage and told Joel to congratulate them too. Soon after that, Tommy and Maria take Joel and Ellie on a tour of the place while explaining to them that the community was founded 7 years ago by Maria and some survivors, and managed to develop it into a commune. Maria then adds that the reason they were able to defend the community from all sorts of dangers was by isolating themselves from the outside world. They didn't use radios or any means of communication to make contact with the outside world, so no one knew about their existence in that place. For this reason, Tommy stopped keeping Joel informed, as he had to abide by the rules if he wanted to join the community. Maria explains that they get their electricity supply from the dam that Joel and Ellie saw earlier and that the population in that place has reached more than 300 people. Maria, realizing that Joel and Tommy need time to talk alone, takes Ellie to a house they have prepared for Joel and Ellie to live in, while Tommy takes Joel to a bar for a drink. In the bar, Tommy asks about Tess and Joel chooses to lie to him by saying that Tess is fine. Joel also lies about Ellie by telling Tommy that he accidentally met Ellie, who wanted to find her family in Fireflies. Upon learning that, Tommy tells Joel that Fireflies has a base in Colorado and they can reach the place in 10 days on horseback. Tommy also warns that the journey is very dangerous because they will face the infected and bandits. Upon knowing that, Joel then invites Tommy to accompany them, but Tommy immediately refuses while revealing to Joel that he will become a father and Maria will give birth in a few months. Joel then asks if Tommy will be a good father, because the Tommy he used to know was a man who always relied on others. Tommy, who heard that, then became offended and told Joel that Joel's life had indeed stopped since Sarah's death, but that didn't mean his life had to stop. Upon hearing that, Joel then leaves Tommy while saying that he and Ellie will be leaving tomorrow morning. While outside, Joel has a panic attack that makes him short of breath and experiences hallucinations, because he seems to see Sarah's presence in the crowd. but Joel soon came to his senses and confirmed that the woman was not Sarah. On the other hand, Ellie, who had just finished bathing, found some clean clothes that Maria had prepared for her. Maria also left a message saying that she was at her house across the street. After getting dressed, Ellie went to Maria's house and found a memorial for Kevin and Sarah made by Tommy. Shortly afterward, Maria shows up and gives Ellie a winter coat, then fixes Ellie's haircut. Maria told Ellie that she used to be an assistant district attorney who was interested in hairstyling. Ellie thought that Kevin and Sarah were Maria's children, and Maria did confirm that Kevin was her son while telling Ellie that Sarah was Joel's daughter. Seeing Ellie's reaction, Maria immediately realizes that Ellie just found out about Sarah, so she then warns Ellie to always be careful with people she trusts, because the people who usually betray them are the people they trust. Later that night, while Ellie is watching a movie at the theater with the residents, she sees Tommy, who seems to be looking for someone, and rushes away after Maria says something to him. On the other hand, Joel is at a repair shop to fix his broken boots, but his efforts are fruitless as his boots cannot be repaired. Shortly afterward, Tommy appears and gives Joel a new pair of boots while apologizing for his utterance earlier that may have offended Joel. Joel then reveals to Tommy that Ellie is immune to infection, as she was bitten months ago and has shown no symptoms. Joel also tells Tommy about Tess sacrificing herself to protect Ellie and also the incident in Kansas City where Ellie saved his life. With teary eyes, Joel tells Tommy that he has become weak due to his age, making it impossible for him to keep Ellie safe. Not only that, Joel has also been having frequent panic attacks and nightmares lately that make him wake up with a deep sense of loss. Therefore, Joel begs Tommy to take Ellie to the Fireflies headquarters, and Tommy finally agrees to escort Ellie. Shortly afterward, Joel goes to the house prepared by Tommy and Maria, where he then meets Ellie in her room and realizes that Ellie has been secretly listening to his conversation with Tommy in the workshop. An angry Ellie then mentions Sarah, but Joel immediately stops her. Holding back tears, Ellie reveals that everyone she loves left her, but Joel chose to stay with her, so she has the courage to continue her life. However, now Joel plans to leave her and she becomes afraid, not even wanting to hope for anything, because Joel decided to leave her side. Upon hearing that, Joel tells Ellie that she is not his daughter and tells Ellie to pack up her things, because Tommy will drop her off tomorrow morning. While in his room, Joel looks increasingly frustrated and remembers his beloved daughter who has left him forever. The next morning, Tommy takes Ellie to the stables and finds Joel intent on stealing a horse to get away from the place. Joel turns out to have changed his mind and gives a choice to Ellie, who without thinking, immediately chooses Joel. Before leaving, Joel says goodbye to Tommy, who then tells Joel that there will always be a place for Joel and Ellie in Jackson. After getting a gun and supplies from Tommy, Joel and Ellie leave Jackson on horseback. On the way to Colorado, Joel and Ellie become closer, and Joel even teaches Ellie how to shoot with a sniper rifle. Joel also tells her about his former job as a contractor, which Ellie thinks has a cool name. Soon after that, Joel and Ellie finally arrived in Colorado and rushed to a university that was used as a base by the Fireflies. Upon entering the base, Joel and Ellie didn't find any Fireflies, as if they were in a hurry to leave the place. Joel tried to look for clues in the place and concluded that the Fireflies might have moved to Salt Lake City. At the same time, Joel and Ellie found a group of people outside and believed that they were the bandits Tommy had mentioned. Joel and Ellie then sneak out through the back door, but unfortunately, one of the bandits learns of their presence and immediately attacks Joel. Joel manages to dodge the attack and is able to kill the man, although he gets a stab wound in the process. Shortly after, the bandits who heard the commotion immediately arrived, so Ellie told Joel to get on a horse and escape from the place, while Ellie tried to dissuade them by shooting at them blindly. Joel and Ellie finally managed to avoid the bandits' pursuit, but Joel suddenly collapsed and fell off their horse, leaving Ellie unsure how to proceed.